Let me tell you a story that still pulls at my heartstrings and brings a little sting to my eyes when I think about it. But oh, it's a story that absolutely needs to be told. You know, life has a funny, often cruel way of teaching us that sometimes the people who should love us the most, the ones we carried, nurtured, and sacrificed for, are the very ones who will test our resolve the hardest. It's a bitter pill to swallow, realizing that the house you built with love has become a fortress you have to defend against your own children. I never thought I'd live to see the day when my own flesh and blood, the daughter I raised with every comfort, every luxury, and every ounce of my soul, would try to lock her own mama in a cage just to get her greedy hands on my bank account. But Lord, greed is a powerful poison, isn't it? It has a way of turning warm blood into ice faster than a winter frost. I'm Dorothy Hamilton, and honey, you're about to hear exactly how I turned the tables on my own family's treachery right in the middle of a stunned courtroom. My Robert, bless his wonderful soul, was a man with the biggest heart you ever saw and a keen business sense that was nothing short of legendary. He was the kind of man who could negotiate a multi-million-dollar merger in the morning and spend the afternoon coaching a little league game. When he passed away last spring, the world lost a giant, and I lost my North Star. The silence he left behind was deafening, but then came the reading of the will. He left behind a $62 million estate. Let that number sink in for a moment. 62 million. Can you even imagine that kind of wealth? To a shark, that's not money. It's blood in the water. We had been married for 40 beautiful, adventurous years, and in all that time, we shared a little secret that our daughter Patricia never had a clue about. You see, to the rest of the world, and especially to Patricia and that slimy husband of hers, Michael, I was just Dot, the quiet little housewife who puttered around in her rose garden and couldn't figure out how to work the Netflix remote to save her life. I played the part of the doting, slightly scattered grandmother to perfection. Bless their arrogant hearts, they saw exactly what they wanted to see. A frail, fading old lady who couldn't tell her smartphone from a toaster. But let me take you back to a time before the silver hair and the floral cardigans. In 1982, I wasn't just somebody's wife. I was one of Harvard Law School's top graduates, finishing second in a class of lions. In certain elite circles of Boston's legal world, they used to whisper my name with a mix of fear and respect. They called me Dorothy the Destroyer. I had a mind like a high-tensile steel trap and a tongue that could dismantle a hostile witness in 30 seconds flat. I remember standing in those courtrooms, wearing power suits with shoulder pads sharp enough to cut glass, watching grown men, partners at major firms, tremble when I approached the bench. I knew the law like the back of my hand, and more importantly, I knew how to read people. When Patricia came along, I made a choice. I wanted to see her grow. I didn't want her raised by nannies and boarding schools. I wanted to be the one who made the crustless sandwiches and tucked her in every night. I stepped back to support Robert's dreams as he built his empire. But I never, not for one single day, let that law license lapse. No, ma'am. Every year, I did my continuing education in secret. I'd wait until the house was silent. Then I'd log on to my private computer and dive into the latest precedents, the newest tax laws, and the intricacies of estate litigation. I kept my mind sharp as a razor, reading every legal brief and multi-million-dollar contract that crossed Robert's desk while I sat in my sunroom puttering with the petunias. Robert knew. He used to wink at me over his glasses and say, "Dot, you're the smartest person in this room, even when you're just making a tuna sandwich." The ugliness began barely 3 weeks after we laid Robert to rest. The house was too quiet, the air heavy with the scent of lilies and grief. When the executor read the will and announced that Robert had left me everything, every last cent. Well, the mask on Patricia's face didn't just slip. It shattered. All she got was a collection of family keepsakes and a trust she couldn't touch for a decade. She had been living a champagne life on a beer budget for years. And Michael? Well, Michael had a consulting firm that was really just a bottomless pit he threw other people's money into. He was drowning in debt, and he saw my $62 million as his life raft. I saw him lean over to her in the lawyer's office. He didn't even have the decency to whisper and say that this mistake had to be corrected. He looked at me with those cold, predatory eyes, and for the first time in 40 years, I felt a chill in my own living room that had absolutely nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was the feeling of being hunted. Within days, the atmosphere in my home shifted from a sanctuary to a hunting ground. Patricia and Michael moved in, claiming they wanted to help me through the transition. They took over the guest wing, but their presence felt like a dark stain spreading across the carpets. They began a calculated campaign of gaslighting. It was textbook, really. Michael would intentionally hide my reading glasses in the freezer or move my car keys to the medicine cabinet, then spend 20 minutes helping me find them while sighing loudly about my failing memory and declining faculties. He'd say, "Oh, Dorothy, you're getting so confused, dear. It's the grief, I'm sure. Don't worry, I'm here to handle the bills. You just rest and let the big boys handle the heavy lifting." He thought he was being a criminal mastermind. He didn't realize that I had hidden state-of-the-art cameras installed in the library and the hallways years ago for Robert's security. Every night after they went to bed, I sat in my darkened room and watched the footage on my tablet. I watched Michael smirking as he hid my belongings. I watched him practicing my signature on a legal pad. Then came the tea. Patricia started bringing me special herbal blends every afternoon at 4 o'clock. "It's for your nerves, Mama," she'd say, her voice dripping with that fake saccharine honey. "It'll help the cloudiness in your head go away." But I grew up with a father who was a pharmacist. I know the scent of scopolamine, the devil's breath. I know the faint, metallic, bitter aftertaste of high-dose benzodiazepines. I'd take one tiny sip, pretend to get drowsy and confused. And as soon as she turned her back, I'd pour that liquid straight into the soil of my large potted palms. Within a week, those hardy palms were yellowed, shriveled, and dying. I took soil samples. I put them in sterile jars and hid them in the back of the pantry behind the industrial-sized bags of flour where I knew Patricia would never look. I started a secret log, a legal-grade journal of their every move. I recorded every lie, every attempt to confuse me, and every dollar Michael tried to move out of the household accounts using my authorized signature. He thought he was a genius because he used a VPN. "Honey, I was coding and understanding algorithms before he was out of diapers. I bypassed his amateur security and found his real bank statements. He owed millions to high-stakes creditors in Macau. He wasn't just greedy, he was desperate. And a desperate man is a man who leaves a trail of breadcrumbs a mile wide. The final straw came when I found Michael's laptop open in the study. He'd been scouting a facility called the Gilded Gates. It looked like a palace on the brochure, but the dark corners of the internet told a different story. It was a grey zone facility where they kept the wealthy elderly heavily medicated, so their families could liquidate their assets without an argument. I saw an email to his broker. "The old bird is losing it. We'll have her in the home by next month. Start the listing for the estate at $15 million for a quick sale. I need the cash by the 20th. I sat in the dark that night, staring at Robert's portrait. I wasn't just a grieving widow anymore. I was a target. And that was the night Dorothy the Destroyer woke up from her long nap. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. I made phone calls to old colleagues. I gathered evidence. And I waited for them to make their move. The trial for my competency took place in a cold, imposing marble courtroom in downtown Boston. I made sure to play my part to perfection. I wore an oversized, pilled cardigan that had seen better days. I let my hair go a bit wild, skipping my usual salon appointment. I carried a knitting bag filled with lumpy, tangled yarn and wore a pair of spectacles that I sat slightly crooked on my nose. I wanted them to feel invincible. I wanted them to believe they were taking candy from a helpless baby. Patricia took the stand first. She was a master of the craft, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief. She told the judge, "Your Honor, it breaks my heart. My mother, she thinks it's 1970. She tries to cook Sunday dinner for my father as if he's still coming home. She's a danger to herself. Just last week, she almost burned the house down. I can't sleep at night knowing she's in that big house alone." The truth? I'd intentionally set off the smoke alarm while making toast, knowing they were watching, just to see if they'd use it against me. They fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. Then came their medical expert, a Dr. Aris. He had a $500 tie and a smug, superior smile. He presented cognitive tests I had supposedly failed miserably. He talked about ventricular enlargement and advanced memory degradation. He used big words to hide his small soul. I sat there, quietly knitting a scarf that was intentionally dropping stitches, looking like I was in a different zip code. I even started humming a nursery rhyme under my breath. Michael smirked at the back of the room, his eyes already spending the $62 million. Finally, it was my turn. Their lawyer, a young peacock named Henderson, who thought he was the next legal superstar, walked up to me for cross-examination. He spoke slowly and loudly, the way you speak to someone who doesn't understand English. "Mrs. Hamilton," he began, dripping with condescension. "Do you know what today is?" I blinked at him, my eyes wide and watery. It's Tuesday? Is it time for my stories on the TV? I don't want to miss my stories. They're having a wedding on the show today." He laughed, a short, ugly sound. "No, Mrs. Hamilton, it's Thursday, and we're here to talk about your well-being. Do you understand that your daughter just wants to keep you safe in a nice, quiet place where people can look after you?" I looked at Patricia. She gave me a fake, pitying smile that didn't reach her eyes. I looked back at Henderson, and then I let the mask slip. "Actually, Mr. Henderson," I said. My voice wasn't shaky or high-pitched anymore. It was a cold, clear, echoing bell that silenced the entire room. "Today is the day you realize that your due diligence was severely lacking. Your Honor, I'd like to move for an immediate stay of these proceedings, and I'll be representing myself pro se from this point forward. I have the paperwork right here." The courtroom went so quiet, you could hear the dust motes hitting the floor. Henderson stumbled back, as if I'd physically struck him. The judge's jaw literally dropped. "I'm sorry?" the judge asked, leaning so far over his bench he nearly fell. "Mrs. Hamilton, do you have any idea what you're saying?" I stood up straight, my spine like a steel rod. I straightened my cardigan and took off the crooked glasses. I reached into my knitting bag, but I didn't pull out yarn. I pulled out a thick, leather-bound legal folder. "I understand perfectly, Your Honor. I am Dorothy Hamilton, Harvard Law class of 1982. My bar license is active, my mind is clearer than anyone's in this room, and I'd like to call my first witness, Michael Vaughan. And Michael, before you get up, you might want to call a criminal defense attorney." The next 3 hours were nothing short of a legal bloodbath. It was the best performance of my life. I called Michael to the stand. He tried to refuse, but I had the subpoena ready and signed before we even entered the building. I didn't ask him about my memory. I asked him about his consulting fees. "Michael," I said, pacing the floor with the predatory grace I hadn't used in decades. I felt alive for the first time since Robert passed. "Tell the court about the $3.4 million you moved into a Cayman account last February. Tell the court why you used my late husband's forged signature to authorize that wire transfer while his body was still at the funeral home." I don't know what you're talking about," he spluttered, turning a sickly shade of grey. "Really? Because Exhibit G is a digital forensic report of your personal laptop, which I secured via a private investigator. It shows you spent 4 hours on a Saturday afternoon practicing Robert Hamilton's handwriting. And Exhibit H? That's the video from the library, the one you thought was a dummy camera, showing you stealing Robert's signet ring from his desk to use as a wax seal for his private correspondence." I didn't stop there. I turned my sights on the doctor. I presented his bank statements, obtained through a very helpful friend in the district attorney's office, showing a $40,000 consultation fee from Michael's shell company, just 48 hours before my evaluation. The doctor turned white and tried to leave the courtroom, but the bailiff stopped him at the door. Then came the final blow. I turned to my daughter. "Patricia," I said. My voice softened, but it was the softness of a whetted blade. "I loved you. I would have given you the entire world if you'd just asked. But you wanted the one thing that wasn't yours to take, my dignity. Your Honor, I have here a certified toxicology report from the state lab. It shows that for the last 90 days, I have been systematically poisoned with scopolamine and diazepam. I have the soil samples from the plants that died because I refused to drink the tea my daughter made for me. And I have the high-definition security footage of Patricia stirring that powder into my cup with a smile on her face while I napped in the chair. Patricia didn't just break. She disintegrated. She fell to the floor, wailing, screaming that Michael made her do it, that they were in debt, that they were desperate. She looked like a child, but I didn't see my daughter anymore. I saw a stranger who had tried to kill my spirit. I didn't look at her. I didn't feel a thing. I just looked at the judge. The judge didn't even bother retiring to his chambers. He dismissed the conservatorship on the spot. He ordered Michael and Patricia to be taken into immediate custody for grand larceny, forgery, and attempted endangerment. He looked at me with a look of pure awe and said, "Mrs. Hamilton, I think the legal community has deeply missed you, but I suspect you're going to be just fine on your own." I walked out of that courthouse alone, my head held high. I sold the mansion that very week, not because I needed the money, but because I didn't want to live in a house where the walls had heard such ugly, hateful lies. I gave the furniture to charity and left the keys on the counter. I'm writing to you now from a private villa in the heart of Tuscany. I have a small, thriving vineyard, a library that would make a scholar weep, and a golden retriever named Robert, who actually listens when I talk. The wine is crisp, the air is clean, and my tea? Well, honey, I make my own tea now, and I drink it while watching the sun set over the vines. I heard from an old friend that Patricia is working at a greasy spoon diner in a tiny town, trying to pay off Michael's gambling debts while he sits in a cell in a state penitentiary. People often ask me if I feel guilty. They ask if a mother should always find a way to forgive, no matter the cost. But I tell them this: a mother's love is a sacred gift. It is a well that never runs dry, but only for those who don't try to poison the water. And if you try to steal the gift by force, You don't get to keep the mother. So, tell me in the comments, what would you have done? If you realized your own blood was plotting to erase you, would you have the heart to destroy them to save yourself? Or would you have let the tea take hold? I'll be reading your answers from my terrace as the sun sets. Until next time, stay sharp, stay vigilant, and keep your business to yourself.